Hey everyone, we're live again. Myself and Luis, and we're just going to jump into it. The one thing is that we did some. If you've been following along the series, we're going to post the um, office hours from last week. That included some work we did, basically catch-up work in React to get caught up to where we were for with Vue. So we're going to start from that point and go forward. But yeah, I'm going to Louis share a screen and we'll get started.
All right, guys. Hi again. Yeah, I want to go over first what we did on the last stream very quickly, just to catch you up, guys, in that regard. So let me just see, Sandy, you can. I know you're still sharing my screen. So essentially,
Yeah,
what we did.
You're good.
Okay, perfect. So essentially what we did was to create a page for showing the auctions. So right now we're listing the auctions here, right? We're just showing the pair. But if you click on one of these, you get to another page, right? That has more information about that particular auction. We just showed, for example, where it ends, the status, and the sell token, the sell amount, and the bid token, and the minimum bid. So we're also showing the balance of the token, of that particular token, your balance in this case. So in this, for Brickhouse, I have 249, and for Secret, I have 499. And yeah, essentially that's where we got, showing a new page with querying the auction contract and also getting the balances for the tokens involved in this auction. So now we want to move forward to maybe do some more work on the auction. I think the last thing that we want to do is to create a new auction, which previously we did using the CLI. And of course, we're going to do to create a UI for that. But for now, I think we can move on to maybe bidding, retract the bid, and maybe close an auction in case that is already an auction has already ended. So I think the first thing that I'm going to work on is to make a bid to a particular auction. So in order to do that, I'm going to use two accounts for that. So in this case, I'm using the, I have here a whale account and a cow account. So I think I'm going to use both. I'm going to send tokens from whale to cow so I can bid on certain on these auctions, which I think both are, the bid token is secret. Sorry guys, here. There we go. Yep. So I think I'm gonna bid on. I'm gonna bid secret for both. But in order to start doing that, we need to actually create or update our auction contract definition so we can add a new message. So let's move on and go to the contracts auction.js file. In this case, we have the auction definition, and as we know, we have the get auction info query. So we're gonna add a messages object so we can add message functions to describe the messages that we want to interact to, or that we want to execute on the blockchain for this particular contract. Before I do that, let me go and check the names for the message that I want to execute. So CLI, well, first of all, I need to get the address of a particular auction. So let me go here, and I'm going to add a new section here. So I think contract address. Let me auction info. We just print the auction info to see the object model. And auction address. Okay. So I'm going to put an auction address here. Okay. So let me see what messages the here we go. And let me do this. So yeah, let me see what messages the auction contract has. So in this case, I'm going to the CLI again, CLI px compute execute, and I'm just going to call a message that I know it doesn't exist, right? See the messages I have available. So in this case, we have receive, retract read, finalize, return all, and change minimum bid. So in this case, I think the message that I want to call, or maybe the message that I want to be called, is the receive message. From what I can assume, because maybe I need to confirm this, Sandy, but I think sending tokens will be enough to bid on this contract.
Yeah, but I think you have to do it as well.
As an account?
No, I think you have to do it at not just like send, but instead you need to right, you need to do a bid, and I guess receive is the bid. Why you do a bid? I don't know. That doesn't sound right, but
yeah, I mean, I can try calling the receive, but essentially, I think what's going to happen.
well, do you want to open up the docs just to quickly check?
Yeah. Let me see. So triggered auction factory. Okay. Here we go.
So
Yep,
you
it's
send it.
just sending.
What
Yep.
can I see you're doing a send and then it's recipient amount.
Yeah,
And
recipient amount, and that's it.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay. Well, let's do that then. So we need to send tokens to this contract. Okay. So gonna go to the auction contract definition. I think I'm gonna call it bid because it's what it does. So remember that this is just a name for the message function, but it's not necessarily, or it doesn't necessarily have to do with anything from the contract. This is just, let's say, a client-side representation of whatever message you want to call. So in this case, we want to send tokens. In order to do that, we need to send this particular query message. I think this is the first message that we're going to send, and so I'm going to explain a little bit, step by step what I'm doing here. So remember that when we are running a query, essentially what we're sending or what we're returning in this query function is the JSON itself that you sent to the contract, right? In which the first and only property of the root object, let's say, is the name of the query that you want to run, and then inside of, well, as the value of that property, you can send out some arguments or some more information about how you want to run that query. So in this case, the approach is similar. The main difference is that the message itself is a particular property, has a particular name, and is a particular property of the object that you're sending here. So essentially what you're returning here is just an object that has a very particular shape or a very particular interface. So in this case, the name of the message is handle message, and this is what we need to return to a message function. Actually, let me so you guys can see with more detail what I'm referring to. If we go to Griptape, I just want to show you very quickly how that type look. Is a contract message request. So essentially, what you need to return for any message function is the following: the handle message, which is the JSON encoded version of. Sorry, guys. Yep. So this is the JSON encoded message that you want to send to the contract. Then you have an optional memo, an optional transfer amount, and optional fees. Okay, so essentially the only thing that is required for the subject is to be the handle message, and you have three more optional pieces of data that you can send. So in this case, for now, we are just going to send the handle message. So in this case, I'm going to create a variable called handle message, and I will create an object that, as a property, have a property called handle message that is going to contain the message that I want to send. In this case, I want to send the send message. And for this send message, I need to send a recipient, or I need to set a recipient and also an amount, right? So in this case, the recipient is the auction contract address, okay? So that means, or in this case, the auction contract address is the address of this contract itself. If I am right, let me just see. Yeah, auction contract address. Okay, so we need to somehow know the address of the contract that is using this definition. Okay, and I'm going to explain how to do that in a moment. But for now, let's just put an empty string as the value for the recipient property. And the next property is the amount. So the amount is something that needs to come from the user in this case. So we need to actually create some sort of way for people to input the amount that they want to put a bid on for this auction, and then pass that amount as the amount that we want to put here. For now, again, I'm going to set an empty string for the amount. Now, how do I get these pieces of information? The first one, I need to know, or I need to find a way to know the contract address that is bind, or that is associated with this auction definition, right? Because this auction definition at this point is just a template, right? We don't know exactly to which particular contract address is going to be bind to. So for that, and this applies for both queries and messages, you can access something that we call a context. So now we're going to introduce a new thing that can help us to build our queries or messages. So the context is, think of it as a set of information, or global, let's say, quote unquote, global information that you can get access in any query or message. The thing for the context is to have information about the contract address that is being bound to this particular contract definition. Maybe some information related to viewing keys. In case that you have a viewing key, you can access to that viewing key through the context. In case that you have also a permit created for this particular contract, you can access that through the context. And some other blockchain information like the block height, etc. So it has like a general purpose store for all that kind of information. So, and that's being passed as the first parameter of any query or message function. Okay, so if you want to access to the context, be very careful that the first argument or the first parameter on any query or message function will be the context. Okay, so now, being that said, I can go ahead and grab you can say recipient, actually, and say, okay, context. If I go back to Griptape, I can see that this is some of the information that I have available for the context. And one of them is the address. And the address, well, this address is referring to the account address, actually. Interesting. I think I dream about having the contract address on the context. Well, this is really weird, guys, but okay. I'm gonna tell you guys how that. Well, this was a very good place to actually introduce the context, but I think we won't use it right now. But for the sake of this example, what we need to do here is also to pass information. We're going to get back to the recipient thing in a moment. I think I'm going to just define here the empty string here. But let's say about the amount. So as I said, the context is the first thing that you get, that is being passed to any message or query function. So any parameter that gets defined after the context are going to be converted into parameters for the function that gets created when calling this message or this query. Okay, and I'm going to explain what that means in a moment. So in this case,
Luis, can I just say one thing? I'm just looking at this. So wouldn't we be putting this? Well, this is an interesting case, right? Because what we're actually doing here is sending the token, not the auction, right? The actual query or message is actually on the SNP20 token, not on the auction contract. Right? Depending on what you're bidding with.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay.
So, yeah. Which is interesting, right? So, yeah, and I'm not sure if that affects what you were looking for with the context or not. But.
No. Yeah, you're right. I was confused. Yeah, I think this was going to be sent to the auction contract. But no, you're right. Yeah, actually, I mean, everything that I said is in fact correct. The only thing that we need to do is actually go here. And
I mean, one thing we could do quickly if you wanted to do a message on this would be to allow the owner to change their minimum bid, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's correct.
If we wanted to do that. So yeah, we could just add that functionality really quick. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Let's move on to that then.
Okay.
Yeah, so in this case, well, we at this point have learned how to define a message function and also what the context is for, right? So it has general information that we could use to use it in our queries or our messages. So in this case, we're not going to bid. We're going to change the minimum bid for this particular auction. So I'm going to call it change minimum bid. In this case, the change minimum bid message is like this, right? Change minimum bid, and then has a minimum bid property that is the amount you need to set. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to create again handle message property, an object that has a handle message property. This is going to be change minimum bid. and going to contain a minimum bid object that has a in this case the amount that we want to set, right? In which we want to change the minimum bid. So in this case, I want to pass in an amount, right? And I want to use that amount to change the minimum bid. Okay. So in this case, we want this minimum bid to be maybe be passed in from user input. And I'm going to tell how to do that in a moment. So now that we have the change minimum bid, this is all you need to do to actually call the change minimum bid message on the auction contract. So the next thing that you need to do is to get the amount from some sort of user interface input, right? So let's go back to the auction page and maybe add some sort of, let's say, form here that will call that change minimum bid message. So this is all the auction info. So I think I can add a form here, and it's going to be very simple. It's going to have an input for the amounts and a button to change. Okay. This submit we'll call a function that will change the minimum bid. In this case,
sorry, is my mic on there?
Yes. I'm going to create a new function called change minimum bid. This will, I'm going to add more data in a moment, but let's see if I can. Okay. I'm going to put the form at the top just to, be able to have it always on the screen, even if the information hasn't loaded yet. So, okay, so we want to write a function that will change the minimum bid. So in this case, we will need to have the auction info, well, the auction contract reference, okay, in order to call the bid, the change minimum bid message. So in this case, what I want to do is to ref contract where is the address? Okay, address, perfect. Ref contract using the address to get the auction contract. And at this point, with the auction contract, I can then call the change minimum bid message. Okay, so if I do contract change minimum bid, then I will be able to call that particular message. Now, as you can see, after the context, I define an amount to be passed in as the second parameter of the change minimum bid function. This second parameter will be translated as the first parameter when I run after we run the create contract line. So the contract line itself is going to have a change minimum bid function that will have one parameter that will be the amount in this case. And if you have, it doesn't matter how many parameters you have at the right of the context, all of those will remain or will be in order, essentially. So
do you need to include the context there, Luis?
Yes.
Okay.
It should be always be included. Otherwise, you don't know which.
If you're going to do something else, but if you weren't going to pass anything, could you just do nothing?
Yeah. If you're not going to use it at all, you can omit it.
Got it. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. So, for instance, in this case, we need to define it because even if we're not using it, we are setting a parameter for the change minimum bid. Right. So in this case, we can just put an underscore or something to make it readable or to express the intention that you are not going to use it in this query. And this is a good practice, by the way, just to let use maybe other people on your team to let them know you're not going to use it, and then define everything else at the right of the context.
Right. So you can name that anything you want. It doesn't have to be CTX. So naming it any underscore is totally fine. That makes sense.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yep. And now that you have defined this and we have the amount, that amount then needs to be passed to the here, right? So what we're expecting here, I think, is in a string that contains the minimum bid, right? The new minimum bid. Okay. So let me then get from the input the value of that we want to change. So in this case, I'm going to create a new state. In this case, it's going to be the minimum bid. Then we are going to, whenever on change, set the minimum bid. And I'm going to, when I submit this, I need the event there. Oh, actually I need the event to prevent and I need to wait and send the amount, which in this case is minimum bid. Okay. So at this point, what we added was a new state to hold the minimum bid. Whenever I change the input, I'm going to change the minimum bid. And then when I submit this form, I'm going to get the contract from the registry using the ref contract, and then calling the change minimum bid message and passing in the minimum bid. Amount that we got from the input. So if we go back to our application, I need to make this asynchronous and import the ref contract from Griptape. Contract, capital C. Okay. So in this case, the minimum bid right now is 20 secret. Well, 20 secret. So I'm going to change that to 10, let's say. I'm going to click the minimum bid button. Well, as you can see, this is not right, obviously. I'm going to reject this in a moment. But as you can see, once I clicked the change minimum bid button, then Kepler pop up and it's telling me to sign in or to approve this transaction. As you can see, the message that we're executing is this. It has this message. It will be executed on this contract. And here I can set either the gas cost, well, the gas and a memo if I want to. So in this case, from this point forward, Kepler will take care of signing this transaction and executing that on the blockchain. I'm going to reject this because before we actually send the minimum bid, we need to convert it to something that makes more sense to the number of decimals that secret is. In this case, secret or the bid token has. So in this case, I'm going back. I'll need to use coin convert to convert the amount. So in this case, let's send amount, coin convert. I'm gonna pass in the minimum bid. I need to get the decimals for the bid token, which I think I can get them from here. For that, for sure, I'll need to wait for the auction info to be available. So I'm going to just make the validation here, auction info. No auction info, then nothing. And then get the bit tokens decimals. And then passing to machine. It doesn't matter really. Let's go back to our application. So now if I send 10, I'm going to see that, sorry, pass in the amount that now as a minimum bid. And now that's it. So if I pass 10, then and I run the change minimum bid, I can see that now the number gets converted to machine, which is our definition to the label that we use for integer numbers or the integer representation of the number. And then if I approve, obviously right now we are not by any reason showing any feedback to the user, but in this case, if I can, sorry guys, so if I think I'll do it again just to get the response. I don't know what happened. I couldn't see in my network tab the transaction being successful. But if I refresh the page, as you can see here, we had a minimum bid of 20 before, and after I run the transaction, now we have a minimum bid of 10. And I can change that, as many times as I want. Obviously, this will cost some gas to perform. Oh, I see. I see what a problem is. Yeah, for some reason I was filtering out some of the transactions. That's why I didn't saw it. But as you can see, if I refresh again, and we are going to wait for maybe to show some sort of mechanism to know when the transaction has finished, but you can see that I changed the minimum bid to 5. So if we want to improve the user experience here, then maybe we want to add some state to, define a loading state for the form. Let's say like this, loading state. Then when the transaction starts, I set the loading to true. Then after I set it to false, and so on and so forth, right? And then I can just maybe add some sort of, let's say that I'm going to conditionally disable the button, right, while the transaction is running. So I'm going to try again. I'm going to change that back to 20. I'm going to run the transaction. So while the transaction is running, I'm going to, if it will be disabled, then when the transaction gets done, you can see that the button is ready to send the transaction again. A better way to handle this, and this is important to know, is that as the same with queries, all messages return promises. So you need to be careful about how to handle the promises, responses, or results properly. So it might be a good idea, to try to catch this, to have a little bit more control. Maybe if we don't want to show any kind of error for now, let's just at least properly set the loading when the transaction has finished. Otherwise, if an error happened, then the loading state will remain. And so on and so forth. So you can increase and you can handle this as, any traditional Web 2, using any traditional Web 2, REST API or HTTP client. And you can handle that by yourself, but essentially you need to, make it in a way that you can express that this is a promise, and you need to handle that somehow. But for now, this is good. So now, as you can see, we create a new message on the auction contract that help us to change the minimum bid. Now, changing the minimum bid, I think it depends only on the seller, right? So the only the account that created the auction is able to change the minimum bid. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, Sandy, but if we try to,
that's correct.
Yeah, let's say if I go back to and change to cow, for instance, I'm going to refresh. We're going to come back to how to handle Kepler events in later streams. But for now, as you can see, if I changed my account to be Cal, and I think I do have some. I do have secret. I think I don't have secret, so I need to bring
But
back.
you're just trying to bid, or what were you trying to do?
Change the minimum bid.
Yeah, you don't need any secret. You just need gas for that.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, right. I think I don't have enough gas either. I guess. But let's try it out. So whatever, if I do change minimum bid, hopefully we can see. Yeah.
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know if you can make it low.
Let's see.
What is your gas for this?
Oh, it's getting the default, so it's
That's pretty high. Yeah. You probably only need 50 or 80. Yeah, fine.
In average. You're gonna approve.
No.
Well, as you can see, we're getting the error. We're getting an error from the contract. Let me actually. It's very annoying that I don't have them in the order they are executed. Again.
What if you wanted to set this gas in the code? I mean, it's probably a pretty important thing, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell how to do that in a moment. So here we're getting an error. I'm going to show you how to get a more detailed explanation of what happened in a moment. But as you can see, if I refresh, I wasn't able to change the minimum bid, right? So I'm going back to Whale for now. And well, as you can see, we changed the minimum bid. Now, for the gas thing that we were seeing, you can set the fee, or well, the default gas by passing a fees property here with the amount that you want. Okay. So in this case, let's say we want 50,000. So we just set 50,000 here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Just set that. There are best practices for doing this, like for handling all the different fees for all the different messages that you have. So maybe you want to have some sort of let's say here on data, we create like a JSON file that contains all the fees for all the different messages. So you can centralize them, and it will be easier to change in the future. If we go back and see the gas, you can see that is 50,000 as we defined. Okay, cool. So now next step would be to do the bidding, right? To bid on an auction. So now we added the change minimum bid. This is a functionality for the owner itself. I was wondering, is there any way to know who was the creator of the auction? We can handle that later, but it would be cool to do that so we can, conditionally render the form or not to show.
Yeah, you would need a viewing key for that. You can basically check to see if you're the owner,
right? Okay. Yep. I think so. Okay. Well, cool. We're going to handle that later, but for now, we're just going to leave the the form there, and after it gets completed, I think we are going to clean up the set minimum bit to empty string. So after do that, and you can also do a lot of some sort of stuff, right? You can, after this completes, you can then refresh, for instance, the, get the auction info again.
Luis, so how do we interpret the error that you got?
Oh, what, sorry?
The error that you got when you tried to use a different one? How do we interpret that error?
Do you mean in the code?
It's encrypted, yeah. How do you decode it? Yeah.
Yeah, well, you will get, if you catch the error here, let's say, I was going to something else, but let's do that.
Sorry, anyway, it's related to the...
Yeah, that's fine. So you can get the error of what happened by, catching it and handle it whatever you want, right? So in this case, let's say I'm going back to cow. In case you want to handle errors, you'll need to catch them. Now that we are here, we're going to try to change the minimum bit. I need to refresh. Insufficient gas. Let me just send some secret to this account. I go to cow. There we go. Well, first of all, as you can see, this is a very well. You can see that we got the error console log, right? We are not getting the log that is commonly thrown by the console, which is an error log. And as you can see here, well, we do. We can see that it worked. The loading state didn't work apparently, but whatever. We're gonna fix that in a moment. So let's say that I'm not the bidder, I'm not the seller of this auction. So therefore, I won't be able to change the minimum bid. So in this case, as you can see, we're just getting that the error that we couldn't find, that we could not found the transaction with this hash. If we try to look at this, we're going to see that we got an error from calling this transaction. So there's a property of the object that you get received, which is called calls, in which you can see which, what was specifically the issue with calling this transaction. And I think that's only available on the latest release on Griptape. So if I'll need to install that. So bear with me, guys. We weren't supposed to, show you all the ongoing development, maybe, because we want to be focused on building the app, but I think this is important for you to know.
Yeah, one thing that I was thinking though is if you're getting a response from a transaction, then you're deciding how you want to refresh the UI. You could obviously requery the blockchain to say, okay, what's my new balance, or what's the new, right? But if you've gone and changed the minimum bid, and you get and it succeeds, then you know what the new minimum bid is, right? So there's no reason to requery the blockchain. I asked you why the error, because how do we know that it passed, I guess? How do we know that it was good, that it worked? And that's kind of what I was wondering.
Okay. Well, you know that it worked because it didn't go to the catch section, so you have either pretty separated or not.
So there's no chance that the transaction could not throw an error, but could just not have made the change you wanted it to make? It's the state. I guess not.
No.
Okay.
I mean, if it succeeded, it succeeded, and that's it. You know, if it failed, well, you need to handle somehow that.
Okay, so you never get a success. The transaction worked, you know, but the response was, you can't make that change, right? You know, I don't know. Never mind.
Got it. I think that will depend. I mean, it can be the case that happens, but that's contract specific. That's a contract specific implementation.
Got it. For the most part, the idea is either the transaction works as expected, or or the contract there's an error.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So if I call this, I'm not going to be able to call this transaction. Get on the file. Let me see. Oh well, this account has a bunch of issues in regards to you can see here what the cause is. I think the error I was having is because of the sequence thing that this account is being used for a bot and it's causing that problem. But the idea here is that you can see the cause here, and well, actually the error is something totally that doesn't make sense, I think, from what I was expecting. But this is what you get when you are, if you're not the seller and you're trying to change the minimum bid. Apparently, there's some parsing error that is causing the error. I think this is a bug in the contract.
Got it.
It might be, but yeah.
Okay, but it worked when you had the right wallet. So yeah, okay.
All right. Well, moving on. So the next thing that we need to do is to do the bid. So now, in order to do the bid, we need to. I'm gonna remove this because we're going to handle errors again. We need to set a form so we can bid on an auction. Then we need to use the sneak20 send function to place a bid, right? Now, one thing that I need to make sure that I double check, but let's make sure. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go to the auction.js file, and as you can see here, we are creating the contract lines for both the sell and the bid token, right? So in this case, what we need for placing a bid is to use the bid token contract address. We need to send an amount of tokens to the auction contract address, right? And then finally set the amount that we want to send. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a form in which I'm going to set the amount of tokens that I want to send. Now, it will be, well, it's not required really, but let's make it clear. So the next form, yeah, could put some titles here maybe. Minimum bid and then place bid. Now I'm going to call this place bid on submit, change bid, and the auction will be place bid. Okay. So we're going to create a new state for that. And now, set bid. I'm going to create the place bid function. And rand default, and then I will require again the auction info. So let's make sure that we have that available when we call this function. And I think that's it. So the first step that we need to do is to get the contract for the bid token. And I'm just going to call it contract. But let's use the ref contract to call the sell the bid. I think it's bid contract. I call it right side bid. Yeah, bid contract. Now the bid contract is a SNP20 token. Therefore, is using the SNP20 def definition, and also has a send the send message, right? So if I do contract.send, then I will be able to call the, well, in this case, it's send function, which in this case has two parameters that you need to send. So the first thing is the recipient, which in this case is the auction contract address, and then the amount. So for the recipient, I need to get the the auction info address. In this case, is auction info dot auction address. Then I need to set the amount. That amount is the bid, which I need to, again, make sure that we're using the proper number of decimals for the integer representation of the amount. So in this case, point convert into passing the amount, which is, I'm gonna call it bid. Then I need to get the decimals for the bid token again. I'm gonna copy paste this. And I'm gonna call it exchange, and that's it. So I'm gonna pass in that amount, and that's it. That's all I need to do. Again, let's do all sort of user experience stuff around this. Bird. And going to false. And that's, I think that's pretty much it. So I can now place a bid by sending tokens to the bid contract in this case, and send this amount of tokens to the auction contract. So let's see if I go back. Actually, maybe want to swap. Do this. So I can place a bid. I can say, okay, I want to place a bid. The bid should be on secret. So I have 499. So let's do minimum bid is 5. So let's do 10. So if I click place bid, I can see that I'm sending to the secret contract. I'm executing this message on the secret contract. The message that I'm executing is the send message. Has this recipient, which is the auction contract address. This amount, which is 10 secret. This has this property, which is a padding. Then I can approve. Again, I'm not handling any kinds of errors or any kinds of fancy UI user experience or feedback. But as you can see here, this is the result that I got from executing that message. And if let's refresh the page just to see how that looks on my balance for the secret token, you can see that I have now 489, right? So because I used 10 of my secret to bid on this auction, which in this case, well, I'm the seller, so that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But if I use another account like Cal, and I go and see more, just for the wallet, see if I can. I'm going to do this really quickly. that. Okay, so secret. I'm going to create a viewing key for secret. Right there, refresh. Well, I'm going to create the folder viewing keys for the tokens later, but for now, I need only secret. I have 67 secret, and I can place a bid, I think, of both. So I'm gonna do the 10, well, the 15 here, I guess. I'm gonna place a bid with the cow account. Because we're in issues with this account again. So I think just going to use another account for this. So let me just send some tokens to this account. Then after, and we can do a test. So the next would be secret. Send here. 100. I'm going to use a test account. And again, we need to refresh. So I can now place a bid. Bid 15 for this one. Okay. All right. So now,
please, do you want to explain why you're getting that 404 error? Or did you already explain that? Why you get the 404 and then you get the 200?
No.
Just in your network thing, when you submit a transaction, the Griptape uses right. It has a system in which it's checking to see if the transaction is on the blockchain, and it does that every second or something, and keeps doing it until it gets a response. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, just to give you context, guys, of why is this necessary. I didn't want to go to that.
Okay, sorry, never mind.
Yeah, no worries. But essentially, there are different modes in which you can send transactions to the blockchain. You can also see that when you're on the CLI, you do config, you can see the broadcast mode to be sync. So there are different broadcast mode that client, let's say, can send transactions to the blockchain. So in this case, the sync mode, essentially what it does is that when you submit a transaction, you automatically get the TX hash as a response. And that's all that you get. It doesn't wait for the response from the blockchain, let's say, or whether the transaction was successful or not. It doesn't wait for that to happen, because that might happen maybe on the current block or on the next block, and it will depend or when the transaction was submitted, but not necessarily it's going to wait when the transaction was completed or result or whatever you want to call it. So in this case, the sync mode, when you submit the transaction, then you get the TX hash, and then you use that TX hash to query the blockchain to get the response, whether if it was successful or a failure. Or you can have a mode called block mode. So the block mode will wait until the transaction gets submitted and gets resolved, right? Successfully or a failure. So in this case, in Griptape, we're using the sync mode to submit the transactions. Therefore, there's a mechanism on the background that is waiting every 6 seconds to do a query on the blockchain using that TX hash to get the response from the transaction that was submitted. In this way, if the transaction takes, it doesn't matter actually the time the transaction gets to be completed. You can always set the UI on a particular state, so you can show whether the transaction was being called or was being resolved successfully, or if it has an issue. But yeah, you might be wondering why you got like 404 errors the first time you call the transaction, and the reason why is because it tries to get the response right away, and then it will wait every 6 seconds to do a new query to the blockchain to using that TX hash to get the response from the transaction that you submitted. So that's the reason why you're going to see this behavior. And this particular thing, it comes from an issue with the block mode, in which the block mode has some sort of timeout mechanism on it. And if the timeout reached before the transaction before we can get the whether the transaction was successful or not, it returned an error. And that was very, very annoying, because sometimes the transaction, in fact, was successfully run or was successfully completed, but the client itself returned an error, and that wasn't really, it was really difficult to handle that case because you needed to figure out a way to see if it was a timeout. Then how do I know if it was successful or not, and so on and so forth. So it was really difficult to handle that specific case, and that's why the sync mode is the default broadcasting mode for sending transactions. There's a way that you can change the broadcast mode in Griptape, but we can talk about that later, about changing it to block mode in case that you want to use block mode. But you have been warned that it doesn't work pretty well with the current set of APIs that we're using to send in the messages, due to that thing that I described. So now that we place a bit, just continue going back to what we're discussing here. I think the next step would be to I think there's no way to, well, you can retract a bit and you can close the auction. But I was wondering if there's a way to this one. So the auction creator may query whether the auction has any active bids with. So in this case, we can call the auction, we can call the has bids query message to the auction contract to see whether the auction had bids or had any bids. So in this case, I think I left one auction without any bids. So let's see if we can show if an auction has bids or not. So I'm going back to Whale because Whale was the creator of both auctions, and I'm going to go to the auction page and show if this auction has bids. So the first thing that we need to do is that we need to add a new query to the auction contract definition. In this case, this query has this form, right? Has bids. It has two parameters, an address and a viewing key. So let's go to the auction.js and create a new query. I'm going to call it has bids again. And this is the message that we need to send, right? So the first thing that we need to provide is an address, and the second one is a viewing key. So this is a perfect example to show the capabilities of the context. So again, for this particular query, we need to pass in the address. In this case, it's saying it is the seller address. For this particular case, is the Whale account address and a viewing key. So apparently, we need to create a viewing key to check whether if this auction has any bids. So I think before we move on to actually calling this has bids query, we're going to create a viewing key for the seller to see if so. But for now, we need to build the contract definition. So in this case, I'm going to use a context to get the address of the current account that is loaded through Kepler. So the property of the context that has that is called address. And as you can see, I can destructure, or I'm destructuring here the address from the context directly. And the second thing that I need to pass in is the viewing key. So for passing, so there's a property also that represents or that has the value of the viewing key in case there's any on the context, which is called key, and I'm going to rename to viewing key. So I'm going to pass in that here, and that's pretty much it. This query. That's all we need to being able to call the has-bids query. But we need to make sure that we have a viewing key available for the contract that we're going to bind to the auction, this auction definition. And also another thing that you need to take into consideration is that the address that we're passing here should be available at the time when you call the has-bids function. Therefore, we need to use the events API, particularly the on account available, to wait until we have an account available to perform this query. So let's go back. I think the auction component is it's been like getting a little bit getting with too much stuff from different domains. You might want to either have separate components for some of the pieces of this particular UI, which will be the best way to handle this scenario. But I'm just going to continue adding more stuff here for the sake of time and having the ability to explain everything. So the thing that we need to do here is to create a viewing key to check if this auction has bids. So I think, first of all, I'm going to add a button here that says something like check has bids or something. I'm going to create I'm going to bind an on click. And I'm going to bind it to that function that we'll call a new function called check has bids. And this will for sure return a promise. And I will, in this case, I'll need to use the auction contract to do this. So in this case, I need to get the auction contract. So again, from the registry, draft contract, address, right? This is the auction contract. Now, we need to make sure that we have a viewing key, right? So if viewing key manager or Kepler viewing key manager get so in case that we don't have a viewing key, I think I'm just going to create a new one for this. So Kepler viewing key manager add this one returns a promise. And pass in the contract. And in case that I have a viewing key, then I can call the contract dot message, right? I'm going to get a response, and for now, I'm going to just print out the response there. So let's see how this looks. Check has bits. Going to, oh, sure. Well, the issue that happened there was that the auction itself is not on SNP20, and Kepler is only able to store SNP20 viewing keys. So I need to create that viewing key with manually, let's say. So I'm going to create another function called create viewing key. In this case, create auction viewing key. And for this, I think I'll need to call the create viewing key transaction of the, or message of the auction contract. So if I go back here, I think the only I don't think this is for.
So Luis,
The
the way it
auction.
works is that the factory creates a viewing key, and then that works on all auctions.
Okay. Okay. Therefore,
I believe so. I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Yeah.
I
It's
think
only
you're right.
auctions you have interact. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I was a little bit confused because it doesn't. Well, it just is, this notation, and I think it's referring to something that is previously mentioned. So that's why it's a little bit confusing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost like the viewing key should be for this should be done at a contract wide or an application wide level.
Mhm.
And I think in our application we have it in the header for that reason.
Yeah, that's correct. And also, I think that will enable you to list your auctions, right? If you're the owner, if you're the creator.
Yeah, you can see my auctions or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Well, yeah, I think if we create the viewing key on the auction page, then it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. It will depend on a lot of the user experience that you want to have, but yeah, it will be site-wide viewing key, or that you will need to create for this. For now, we need to define new message on the auction. On the auction factory contract definition, that will have this particular. It just requires an entropy, and I think that's it, right? Okay. So the name of the message is create viewing key, and it requires one parameter, which I think is required, which is the entropy. The entropy, generally speaking, is a, let's say, random string, with an arbitrary length that is being used as the seed for a random number generator that is being used for creative viewing key. You need to know all the details about how to build one properly, but we have followed the recommendations from Secret Network to build one, and it's available on the context too. So if you get
Oh, that's really cool, Luis. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So if you need to generate an entropy by yourself, if you want to generate it by yourself, you can do it, but I'll strongly recommend just to use Flowchat. There. And that's pretty much what you need to do. Then we need to call this. I think I'm going to call this, as we mentioned, maybe another component. There will be site-wide available. So in this case, I'm going to the default layout, maybe.
So basically, the check has bids should just say you need to create a viewing key at this point instead of having to worry about that, right?
Or yeah, that's another. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
another.
because it's going to be site wide, so you would yeah.
Once you create it there, it will be available all
So
over.
check has bids should just say if you don't have a viewing key, then it would say create a viewing key on the site, and then there would be some sort of thing in the header or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I mean is you can just get rid of that create auction viewing key in the auctions JS and just
oh, this one.
yeah. And it's just said in the wait Kepler viewing key or whatever, you would just say
There's the viewing key manager here. Cool.
So there's two viewing key managers. There's a Kepler viewing key manager and just a viewing key manager. The plain viewing key manager stores your viewing keys in local storage. The Kepler one stores them on Kepler and in local storage or checks for Kepler, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, cool.
Yep. So, yeah, in case that you don't have a viewing key, well, for now, what we're going to do is to just do nothing because we won't be able to run the hasbits query. So right now I don't have a viewing key, therefore if I click it, nothing will happen, right? So that's fine. Now, if we go back to the default layout, we might want to create a new component. It will be pretty fast. So this component will be like viewing key auction factory viewing key. Well, I don't know how to call it. I'm just going to call it viewing key.js for now.
Yeah, that's fine. And Luis, you should probably allow it to someone to type their own as well. It's got to be a pretty common pattern when it's not in Kepler, you know?
Okay, understood. For default viewing key, there we go. And okay, cool. So for this component, this will be pretty quickly. I need to import the auctions factory. Contract from contracts, and then auctions factory, right? So we can call the create viewing key. So in this case, in case you have a viewing key, then we need to show some sort of state in which, in case you don't have a viewing key, we need to show some sort of state to tell you to create one, to tell the user.
Yeah, an image of a colorful key versus a gray one or something like that. But for right now, it could just be like a plus or minus in the top right corner or something.
As viewing key is set as viewing key. Well, I think so. And there's a false, and we're not focusing a lot of user experience here, but so in case that you don't have viewing key, what we need to do is create viewing key. And in case you have already viewing key, we're going to show your viewing key is now we're going to import the use state for the use effect, sorry, to show whether the user has a viewing key or not. So in this case, we will need from Griptape to import the viewing key manager. Viewing manager. From Griptape. And we need to say, well, we're going to create like a init function, something like that. All the init function here. Or check viewing key. If viewing key manager dot get
The auction factory address.
A little bit. So auction factory at. So in case that we, I think it will be super more easy. We just set as viewing key. As viewing key. Type of is different, undefined. Okay. So in this case, if I go to the default layout and import the viewing key from components viewing key, I render that component here. Need to set this as a div, I guess. I think I'll make this as scan. Nothing to worry about. So now you can see here at the header that I have the create viewing key and I have a button there. So I can bind to that button a new event when clicked that will create a viewing key. So in this case, I'm going to do a new function, create a viewing key that will turn a promise, therefore it's asynchronous. And I need to
auction factory dot create viewing key, right?
Yeah, auction factory create viewing key. That's right. So finally, not going to handle errors here. So this result factory auction factory dot create viewing key. And then now, the create viewing key message returns a viewing key in the response of the transaction itself. what that means is that we need to somehow get the result get the data that comes back from the contract. We need to somehow get it on get it somehow, essentially. So in this case, once you run a create viewing key message, in this case, and you wait for the response, well, you need to await the promise, and you get the result that gets resolved by the promise. You can use this result to get that information. The only thing is that sometimes, or well, not sometimes, all contracts commonly return that information in as well. They're not encoded, but they return like a bunch of bytes that represent that whatever the result was for a message being executed. So what that means is that you need to somehow encode, or well, in this case, decode that set of bytes, and which is commonly a UTF-8 string, what gets what you get back from the contract, but the response is not that easy to do. So what we got from Griptape is a particular interface that is able to parse or to give you that response in a much easier way using a very simple API. So in this case, what you get from here, I'm going to show that. It's interesting because I'll need to run 2 transactions, but as you can see, I didn't wait for that. But when you run the transaction, what you get from the response is a contract TX response handler. And what you get from this object is the response itself from that, what you get from the contract, and also you get some sort of a set of APIs that make it easy to manipulate the response. Okay, so in this case, we're looking for the viewing key that gets returned when the contract was
so Luis, this object that you're getting back, this contract response handler, that's a Griptape thing, right?
Yeah.
That's not native to.
Nope.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
To Secret.js or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is Griptape code, and well, this response is what you get from the blockchain, and the viewing key is actually right here in this data field. Obviously, it's not, as I mentioned, you need to somehow decode this to a particular format. In this case, use to a UTF-8 string, so you can get exactly what you expect from this contract response. So the first thing that we need to do before we use that is to check if the data field is empty. So there are times that contracts don't return any, when running a message, just doesn't return any data. So you need to check if that was the case for this. So we know that create viewing key returns data, but it is a good practice just to make sure that that's not empty, right? So if result is empty, then we don't do anything. Now, if result is not empty, therefore it has data, then I can get the response from the contract by running the result.parse parse function. This will automatically get the data field and decode it using UTF-8 encoding. The UTF-8 is encoding. And once it gets that, it will parse it. It'll parse it as a JSON, and you will get that back. Because obviously, when you decode it, you will get just a plain string. But it's very common that transactions returns any response in JSON. The same way as you send all your messages as JSON, then you can get back all from the contract itself, everything as JSON as well. So in this case, we get the response from that, and the response, I'm going to make another transaction for you guys to see the response. Create a being key, and approve. As you can see, I got an object that has a property called viewing key and a property named key that has a viewing key that we're looking for. So in this case, the last thing that we need to do is to get that viewing key. Once we get that viewing key, then use the viewing key manager to add it to the contract. That's it. Now that we have that, we're going to call the check has viewing key here. When we finish, I think I'm going to add some loading. So and I'm going to set viewing key right. So add the viewing key, set the viewing key to my local to the state to be rendered, adding the user some user feedback to know when the transaction is finished, and then updating again the if the user has a viewing key or not. So if I do that, contract is sorry, the Option Factory contract. I go ahead and create a viewing key, approve it. I'll see that that's it, right? So I have a viewing key, and then I think that what I need to do here as viewing key is in case that we have a viewing key. Okay. So when I refresh, I should be able to put the viewing key only if the account is available. So if the account is available, then I check if we have a viewing key. if is account available. Just need to check it directly. If not, that's it there. So remove an account available. And let's import from Griptape. So is account available and on account available. Okay. So now that we can see our viewing key, now we can check if we have bits. I think this is not this contract. This is the auction, actually, auction factory. So I need to import it from.
Luis, this is going to be interesting because I think when you check this, you might get a strange response because I think it comes back in the logs, not in the data, because it's querying, it's going on and querying another one. You know.
Okay.
Let's check it out. I'm curious. I remember this from when we built it originally.
Got it. Okay.
And the HADS bids would have to pass in the auction address, right? That you're asking about?
Because this, I think I messed up here. Yeah. No, because this is the contract.
Oh, okay. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
So, okay, let me just auction factory, sorry. Okay. Now, if check has bits, can I convert object to printed value? Ref contract. Ref contract. Sorry, guys. Where is the ref contract? This is not action factory. This is address. I click has bits. Then I got a. Oh. Has bits. Let me see the action factory. Yeah, this is an interesting case because what you need to for.
Right, your viewing key won't be in context because it's not for the contract. It's not for that auction. It's for the factory. It's for every auction.
Yeah, that's correct. So in this case, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to. At okay, at bits. Okay. This is a really interesting case, actually. But again, so has bits true. Okay.
So are you asking from? Let me ask you a question. Are you asking from the position of the owner of the auction or the person who placed the bid?
I'm doing it from the creator of the auction.
Got it. Okay.
So this makes sense for sure.
Yeah, totally. So that makes sense. So it's either yes or no. You don't know how many bids.
Exactly. So in this case, then I can just get the response, right? So
Mhm.
as bids. Obviously, again, guys, the way the model, the data is structured is contract dependent. This is contract dependent data that we're getting, and well, this is for sure. This pattern doesn't make a lot of sense, having has bits and then has bits again. But it will depend on the contract. In this case, the way that they structure it. If I were the person who developed this, it might be the case that I would use like some sort of has bits and then value, right? If this is the only way that I can return it, it will be has bits and then value through value files. But this is what it is. And then I can maybe set the what we might want to do some state, right? To say, hey, you have bits or not. So has bits, and then set has bits. Again, just for the sake of simplicity.
So Luis, just for my own, just for a test, can you switch to the contract that created the bid? I mean, after you set this.
I'm just going to show an element here. Yes or no. So that's it. Yes. Well, obviously, first is going to say no, but yeah, we can fix that later. For now, I think. Oh well. Okay, additional that's something. We can figure it out later. But so then ship bits. Return. There we go. Okay. So yeah, sorry, Sandy. What do you wanted me to test?
I'm just curious what happens when you do that as not the owner of the contract.
Okay. Cool.
I don't think it'll give you a yes or no. I think it'll tell you can't know that information.
Okay, so I changed my account to Cal.
Yeah.
I'm going to refresh.
It's gonna be difficult because you're saying you're having problems with Cal, because you're first gonna have to create a viewing key.
Oh yeah. So let me go back to test.
Just so you guys know, the reason he's having problems is we use that address for using it for a bot, and you can't have more than one transaction in a block, and anyway, it's a whole thing. But
all right, so I'm going to create a viewing key first.
Mm-hmm.
Now, once the viewing key is created, then I'm going to check if I have bits. And yep, I got an error.
Switches.
So, can you open the logs?
But
Okay, I was just checking. Yeah.
no, yeah, but this is not the query actually, right? So let me. Why not? It's not filtering. Okay, cool. So check has bits. Okay. Yeah. So when this returns an error, it returns something else. So this has bits. Obviously, we were assuming that. Yeah, so this is what you get: viewing key error, address, error, viewing key doesn't match action.
Right, and so this gets us to the idea that like two people are looking at the same contract, but because of who they are, they see something different. They're going that we need them to see something different. If you're the auction owner, then you should see some more information than the other person, essentially. So yeah, and you can handle that either by having like a front end feel where if you go to the auction, everyone sees the same thing, but it's like it's the user's view, and then you have some sort of like back end area that if you have a viewing key at all, it'll show you your auctions and you can go there and see more information about them. For instance, that would be one way of doing it, where you sort of split the application into two places, or the way that the current application works is that the basically it checks to see if you're the owner when you go to any auction, and then it shows you different stuff. As I think about it, I kind of feel like the former is a better way if you were to actually be building this, because it would speed up the user interface experience, not having to first check to see if they're the owner and then giving all this like owner permissioned type stuff. When the vast majority of people aren't going to be owners, they're going to be users. So they're going to be playing with it. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
I mentioned that, yeah. But we're past 2 hours, so I think we can stop here. But I think this is good. So basically we've gone through, a number of things. The more we do the more we go to build this application, the more I remember how complicated this is, like an application to build. Because of all these sort of strange aspects of it. It has a factory, you do the viewing key on the factory address, etc. So anyway, I think it's really flexing the muscle, or you would, of Griptape, and showing you all sorts of different things, and we're having to but I think Griptape's been able to handle it pretty well, which is really nice.
Yeah, totally, and it has brought some ideas actually for how to do certain things. For instance, I haven't had the necessity to do some sort of this, like passing viewing keys between contracts and all of that. I don't know how common it is, but for this application, it might be the case that, well, obviously this is secret, a specific issue because of the way that viewing keys work and whatever. But it's kind of interesting that you can use a viewing key for Well, it makes sense now that I think of, because the contract itself has control over the contracts. In this case, the factory contract has the rights, let's say, to see the other contracts information. Or
yeah. I feel like it's sort of to use one word to describe what we're doing. Viewing key maybe obscures a little bit what like from a expressive standpoint of what's actually going on. I would like in this case it to be more like a username and password situation, or just a password situation. So wallet address being your username, and then you set a password, and then you have control over all of the options that you create or anything like that, right? And then you pass it in. Viewing keys sort of feels a little bit more like it's specific to a piece of information that you want or something like that other people aren't allowed to see or something. I don't know. But yeah, this is
yeah, I see what you're saying. Essentially, yeah, I think this is an authorization it's not well, the blockchain itself do authentication and authorization, let's say, like into steps. The first authentication has to do with your address. That tells you who you are.
Yeah.
And the authorization mechanism that Secret added is the viewing key,
right,
which is essentially a password.
Yeah.
So that's
it's just that in a traditional application, you have one point of access. Essentially, you check to see if the person is authenticated, and then you give them permission to see all the information for that user across the entire database or the data model or whatever of your application. You don't have to keep rechecking for each piece of data that you've saved in the database, or for every table in the database. You don't have a different password, let's say. And so when you do this, it actually starts to feel a little bit nice. It feels like familiar in a way, where you have the factory which controls the access, and then you can create as many of these other contracts as you want, and those all are just open as long as you have access to that factory. So. Well, anyway, I think we'll kind of leave it at that. Tomorrow we're going to be doing this in Vue. I don't think that many people are watching right now, but I think this will be good to have on YouTube. Let me get my video. Hey. So yeah, I think that's it. We'll be back tomorrow for Vue.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thanks everyone.